think about it, yeah, our own story, the story of the evolution of humanity, right? Our ancestors didn't make, wheels out of vacuum. They observed the rolling logs, yeah, the movement of animals, the natural shapes, right, which have motion, which facilitate movement, right? This, in essence, is biomimicry, okay? Innovation inspired by nature. Yeah. How many of you have already heard this word biomimicry before the TED Talk? Okay, all right. So we have one person in the audience. Now, biomimicry is not about looking to nature as a source of resources alone. It's about looking up to nature as a mentor, as a model, yeah, as a measure for sustainable and innovative solutions. Are you with me? Yeah. Now, if we compress the entire timeline, right, of the world, of the planet, into 1 year, human history would really begin on the last hour of the last day, and industrial revolution would begin in the last 2 seconds. You know what is the industrial revolution? Okay, look it up if you don't. Very, very, very important point in the evolution of humans. Yeah. And, yeah, okay, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have been bitten by a mosquito and not realized the prick? Yeah, a lot of us, me too. Yeah. How do you think the mosquito manages, right, to bite us and give us a painless bite rather? Anybody thought about it? Well, fortunately for us, there were people who have thought about it, okay? And a lot of deep research, right? We today have painless injections, okay, inspired by how the mosquito injects or bites us, pricks us painlessly, okay? It's quite complex. It's a complex process, and it's like a 3-stage process. I won't go into the science of it. But know that looking at how nature has been doing things, we have managed to learn from it, adapt, and we've managed to also apply it in our day-to-day living, right? Now, right from the time of the wheels that we have made, right, humans have been mimicking nature. It's in our DNA actually, like I said earlier, it's in our DNA to learn to adapt. And nature is always there, the silent, ever-present teacher amongst us. Yeah. How many of you have looked at nature this morning? 1, 2, 3, okay. So at the end of this talk, I would love for all of you to just go around your school, okay, and see whatever you have around, right? Maybe in your lunch break. Take this as a homework if you want to, yeah, but do that exercise. Janine Benyus, you would know since you have a little bit of, you've known about biomimicry. Janine Benyus is a pioneer of biomimicry, right? And she once said, learning about the natural world and learning from the natural world are two completely different things. Okay? Now, in the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to help us uncover some of the amazing inventions, some of the amazing discoveries that have been made in our world today using this principle of biomimicry. Yeah. Remember Wakanda? Yeah? Black Panther suit? Right? Think spider web silk. Okay? strong, yet light. Okay? So right from the real world to the fiction, or from the fiction to the real world, we have biomimicry that inspires us, and your next big idea could really be out there. Okay? So I'm going to take you through a few stories of biomimicry, and give me a show of hands if you've seen this or you relate to it. Right? Now let's take the case of the bullet train in Japan. How many of us know about the bullet train? We've heard about the bullet train, all of us. Brilliant invention, right? I think 1989. Right? Shinkansen, the brand of this train, the bullet train doesn't look like our trains. Right? The bullet train has a very sharp nose, right? And it can reach top speeds of 300 plus kilometer per hour. Right? But it wasn't always looking like this. It started with a rounded nose. While it was a train that was fantastic because it would really travel fast, and it was a good invention to this world, it had a couple of issues. It was slightly inefficient, right? And when it entered a tunnel, right, the compressed air would create a huge boom as the train moved out of the tunnel, so much that the residents in the neighboring areas would be very, very disturbed. Now, this was a problem that Shinkansen wasn't able to solve using all their engineering knowledge, right? But they were in luck. The chief engineer, the general manager of Shinkansen, was a bird watcher. Yeah, what? A bird watcher. Okay? And he observed birds and applied what he learned from birds to the bullet train. Right? I'll give you a little more detail so that you understand how we learn from nature. Yeah? So what he did, he looked at 3 birds. Okay? The owl, the penguin, and a kingfisher. Yeah? Now the owl feathers, he studied them very closely. They had serrated margins. Okay? He constructed the pantometer, the part which connects the train to the electric circuit above, right? He based that and constructed that taking inspiration from the owl's feathers. Okay? Next, he looked at penguins, the Adelie penguin, and looked at the shape of the body and how it offers very less resistance when it swims in the water. And he used that structure, that shape, to create the support to the shaft. And then came the magic. Right? What was the magic bullet? What was the magic bird here? The kingfisher. Right? How many of you have seen a kingfisher in real and now in action? Yeah? What is a kingfisher in action? A kingfisher in action dives into the water to catch its prey. That's one of the reasons, for its existence. Right, is to feed and then to procreate. Now, E.G. Nakato, the general manager, studied kingfishers very closely, and he realized that when a kingfisher hits the water, when it dives into the water and it hits the surface of water, it doesn't make a splash. What would happen if it made a splash? The fish which it was trying to prey on would know what's happening and they would all disperse. So this beautiful design of the kingfisher beak allows it to dive deep into the water without making a splash and go straight to its prey. And he used this to understand how to redesign the nose of the bullet train. In fact, they tried 3-4 different designs and finally figured that this was the best design. And guess what? It increased the speed of the train by 10%, it reduced electricity consumption by 15%, and it also made less sound, 70 decibels, which was the limit, right? So using the feathers of the owl, the body of the penguin, and the beak of the kingfisher, right? He just created magic. And this magic had always existed. It just took a little bit of interest, observation, and curiosity, and to figure out how to convert this. I'm going to tell you another story. Mick Pierce, okay? Mick Pierce was an architect, a very, very able architect, who was invited by a finance company in Zimbabwe, in Harare, to create the largest known shopping center with a back office attached. Great, he was good at it, he did it, no problem. But here was a challenge. This company did not want to take on the huge cost associated with air conditioning this system, with this building, because it was really, really huge. Now, Pierce worked with a few biologists. Okay? He started looking at how systems are cooled in the natural environment, and he stumbled upon self-cooling mounds, okay, of termites. Right? These African termites that he studied along with his team have a very complex system inside the mound, right, of tunnels. And the ventilation is natural, right, and it requires no external energy. To cut the long story short, right, he worked closely with his team, and the way they looked at it, and this is something that I want to share with you because that's the process that you follow, right? You look at the challenge first. I'm just breaking this down for you. What was the challenge? The challenge was to create a cooling system which is low cost and efficient, right? Next comes the inspiration. What was the inspiration? The African termites and their mounds, and some of you might know this, but the termite mound, you see right on, how many of you have seen a termite mound? Okay, I'm sure the others have also seen a termite mound. You might not have known what it is, okay? Once you see the photograph, you can go back and keep your eyes open and you will see the termite mound. It's like an iceberg. It is as deep below or deeper below as you can see on top, right? It's an entire complex chamber. So having understood the challenge came the inspiration. What was the inspiration? These termite mounds, okay? Then comes the concept of biomimicry. So what did they pick up from this termite mound? They picked up thermal mass regulation. They picked up the chimney effect. They picked up ventilator mechanism, right? They also added an external device. You will see the external structures is also what they added, right? And the result was an absolutely low cost energy saving. Up to 35% energy is what this cooling device saved. Plus, it reduced, right, all the environmental or non-environmental friendly or environmentally non-friendly, right, chemicals that are used in an air conditioning system. The outer structure, as you see, also has a lot of perforation-like things, like prickly areas. This is also part of the architecture, and this is something he picked up from cacti, okay, and added to make it a complete system, right? So there you go. That's your result, right? And of course, he worked with an entire engineering firm, and it was a lot of work. It took them many years, but this is what we have. 1996 is when they constructed this, and it is probably the first large-scale not self air conditioning, but a very, very low cost and very sophisticated air conditioning system that they were able to provide only by studying what's already out there, right? And like we saw earlier, and we saw the timeline of humankind. You remember the timeline we looked at, right? We came in, and industrial revolution came in 2 seconds before the end of the year. So clearly, now you see how nature, right, has had a huge lead time over us to solve so many complex problems. Yeah. Almost 3.8 billion years is what I hear. Yeah. And that's a really long time for somebody to experiment and, you know, get things right. The next story I want to tell you is that of a Dr. Bartlett, okay? A young researcher, postdoc fellow, yeah, who was very curious and very excited to anything that was, you know, new. So when he was studying, the scanning electron microscope was released. Anybody knows what's a scanning electron microscope? You're all, no? Scanning electron microscope, it helps you. You know what's a microscope? People, microscope, familiar word? Right? A scanning electron microscope has much higher resolution, okay, compared to a microscope. Now this was released recently, and Dr. Bartlett was very, very curious to look through the microscope, mainly to study the leaves. Okay, he was a botanist. He went to the greenhouse, he picked up leaves of different plants and put them under the SEM, the microscope, to study the microstructures, the microtextures on the leaves. This also helped him to come to so many different conclusions. He also figured that cacti are actually connected or related to carnations. Can you believe that? Yeah. And while he was studying this, he figured that when you put anything under the scanning electron microscope, it needs to be absolutely clean and dust-free. Right? So he took a lot of effort in cleaning these leaves before he actually put them under the microscope. Now, what he saw, what he observed and found very, very interesting is there was one leaf which never required any cleaning. Yeah? And that was the lotus leaf. Right? Now, on further studies, he realized that lotus leaf has certain microstructure perforations, again some ridges on the leaf, which make it self-cleaning. Which means every time water drops on the lotus leaf, it actually cleans the leaf of the dirt, right? And any other particles that might be on the leaf. And he figured that if this could be applied to our lives, right, which means a self-cleaning solution, something that does not require chemical detergents, which is going to be cost-effective, which is going to be more sustainable. He spoke to physicists about this, he spoke to biologists about this, but the physicists said, nothing like this exists in this world, in our world. It must be something to do with biology, so don't talk to us, don't ask us about it. Right? And the biologists had never observed this phenomenon, that when you put a drop of water on a lotus leaf, it just rolls off. Okay? It took him 10 years, actually 20 years, to actually convince the scientific world about the properties and this lotus leaf property. Right? And today we have Lotusan, which is a paint used on buildings and facades, right, which self-cleans. So which means when it rains, the dirt just comes off with the rain. So it's a self-cleaning solution. Right? Now, the Lotusan, I must tell you this because it's got an Indian involved, and I was very happy to know this. The invention itself, right, was one part of it. But remember I told you it took him that many decades to bring it to the world. And that is also something that's important for us to note. And here, an Indian journalist helped him. Right? His name was Mr. Ranga. And he was of Indian origin, studied in Bangalore city, and grew up in Luxembourg and spoke 8 languages. He partnered with Dr. Bartlau and wrote about this phenomenon everywhere, all newspapers, in the airline magazines across the world, right? And with that amount of visibility and that amount of advertisement, it still took him that long to bring this out, right? So we need to appreciate also what goes in to not just understanding what is biomimicry, or not just understanding, what we can be inspired by, but also how do we translate this back, right? And you see the lotus leaf and also the structures there. Right? There are a few more stories which I want to tell you, but most importantly, for you who come from the tech world today, how many of you are familiar with drones? Yeah, you may not have seen a termite mound, but definitely know about a drone. Okay? Now, drones we know have got fantastic uses, right from military to life-saving, rescuing missions. Drones have been designed, redesigned, and redesigned over and over to maximize their efficiency. But here's what scientists have realized, right? We don't need to recreate or rethink the structure of a drone while they are refining it and defining it. They figured that just by studying animals, okay, and how animals move and what is the physics, right, with which these processes happen, yeah, in birds and other creatures and other species, they have decided to realign, to reinvent drones. So the drones that we see now are much lighter, much faster, right, and they fly much higher. They have studied the skeletal structure, the muscular system, right, and also the neural networks, most importantly, right? And that's what, because the direct connection is between something that's flying and a drone, but the neural networks in so many different animal species is also what's contributed to what drones can do today. Yeah. I want to leave you with a very interesting story. How many have seen a lizard, a gecko as it's called? Come on. Have you touched the gecko? Anybody picked the gecko? Well, fortunately for us, somebody did. Okay? So there was this young researcher again, okay, Dr. City, and he noticed that the gecko walks up on the walls, right? And he was very curious as to how this would happen. So he and his friends, who were again biologists, they realized that the feet of the gecko, right, have fibers. Okay? And these fibers, when they touch the surface, okay, creates this intermolecular adhesion. The beauty of these fibers is that once the gecko walks away, you don't even know that the gecko has walked, unless of course it's left a dropping, and that's another thing, right? So these scientists came up with the idea of creating adhesives using this science and understanding how this biology works, right? Adhesives which will not show, the marks won't show once you've pulled it out. It was, one of the friends actually joked about it on a flight, but it stayed in Dr. City's mind. And he kept working on it, and when he joined, he started this work in California, in Berkeley, right? And then he went on to doing his postdoc, did seminal work on the gecko, fingers of the gecko, and the fibers on the fingers of the gecko. And we have a product today, actually a range of products, right, called Cetex. Okay? Now, Cetex is a brand of adhesives that is used in manufacturing industry, because where you want to pick up something that is heavy, okay? Now, these things, even like one small square inch of this, square meter of this, can pick up many, many pounds of weight. Right? So you want something that is light, that can pick up heavy weight, and transport it, and actually acts as a catalyst, because there is nothing that is remaining on it once the movement happens, right? And this is actually $1 million industry today. Adhesives which are made inspired by the gecko, and yeah, that's the adhesive. I'm sure you'll find this in the market, and I'm pretty sure you'll find it on Amazon as well. And of course, there are many, many other examples. There is we look at the example, yeah. Spider, everybody familiar with a spider? With a spider web? The spider web silk, right? When you see spider web silk, you would have seen it around your apartments, or maybe you went to a garden, you went to a forest. But remember this, there are also birds in the forest which keep flying, right? And these webs there are also huge webs. It's very surprising that birds don't get stuck in these webs every day. Anybody thought about how? The web silk is coated with UV. It has a UV coating, and birds can see UV. So they don't go in and crash into the webs. Okay? So this company, Ornilux, they have created, you've seen these facades these days, all buildings have got glass panes, and we have birds banging against them, hurting themselves, dying in the bargain, right? This company has found a way to study the spiderweb silk and use the same UV coating on the glass facades on buildings. They may be a tad expensive, but they protect our wildlife, right? Another example is cat's claw safety thumbtack, right? What's the connection between a cat's claw? I don't even see claws there, right? How many of you have cats as pets? Yeah? So, cats, you might notice, their claws, unlike our nails, can retract. You don't see the claws here. Okay? When it needs the claws, it brings them out and it can retract them, which also means safety. Right? So, in fact, this is also the winner, like you see, of the Red Dot Design Concept Award. So these tags were created so that we don't hurt ourselves, right? And so safety is also something we are learning from nature. While we think that we are safe and nature is wild, here is, a small contrast I thought I should share with you. Yeah. Cancer treatment, nanomedicine, amazing application, right, of biomimicry. This is called camouflage strategy. There are many camouflage strategies. Cephalopods have camouflage strategies. Many insects, we don't even see them because they are so well camouflaged that it takes really a trained eye, or it takes a lot of observation to come look at them, and then you will see, these insects which almost, you keep staring at a bark. The next time you walk to a tree, just keep looking at that bark maybe for 30 seconds to 60 seconds. I think beyond that, I don't know how much the attention span is, but you will definitely find things popping out which you didn't see before. Okay, and that's because these insects have an amazing camouflage. Yeah? Now, we've seen all these stories, right? What's a common thread between all these stories? Right? There are two approaches to how biomimicry works, okay? One is biology to design. That means you go out, we look at nature, we go on lots of nature walks, right? We understand what's out there and then see, wow, can this be adapted like the gecko? The other thing is challenge to biology, okay, which is what Pierce did, because he had a challenge to create this building, right? And then he looked to nature to find an answer, right? So these are the two approaches, right, to biomimicry. The next big idea, really, for all of us might be in the wild there, or maybe even in your backyard, okay? So, would your next invention, okay, or your first invention, how is it going to make life easier, okay, faster, safer for the planet? Yeah? How are we going to map, how are we going to create sustainable solutions? Like this city where we live in, Bombay for example, or any other cityscape that you might see. What are the challenges? What are the big challenges facing cities today? Urban spaces, yeah? Flooding, at least here, right? Can we look to mangroves? Okay, mangroves are a group of trees that live in saline conditions, right? And they're always living in water, and so it's waterlogged, and Bombay is a classic example for mangroves. We also have other issues related to mangroves, but I'm talking about the property of mangroves to live, right, in a waterlogged condition. Maybe an idea could come from here, yeah? Waste management, right? We can look at fungi, right? The world of fungi, which includes mushrooms, lichens, and how they decompose, and can we take, some learning from there and apply it back into our lives, right? Housing crisis, right? Typical of every urban space. Can we look at beehives? Okay? How bees have managed to pack in so much of their population. There are so many bees in one beehive, and they all live very, very amicably, right? Can we look to beehives for a solution? Yeah. So this world, oh yeah. I also want to leave you with where you can find these answers or how you can find these answers. to your inventions. So you have biomimicry.org, you have learnbiomimicry.com, and you have Ask Nature. Okay, Ask Nature. Right? The hidden harmonies that we've been talking about, okay, they're not just patterns in nature. Right? These are bridges. Okay? They are bridges between disciplines, bridges between generations. Could be bridges between us and a future that is a little wiser, okay, a little quieter, a little safer, and maybe a tad wild. Okay? We just have to get out there, observe, and be curious. Thank you.